My name is Cassandra Van Dyke, and I'm a communications officer with the Alzheimer Society of B.C. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and we want to ensure people affected by dementia know that they are not alone. This month, we are sharing the experiences of people affected by dementia who have found meaning, connection, and joy after a dementia diagnosis, in part by connecting with us. You might notice that some of us on the screen are wearing Forget Me Not pins today. So this year, during Alzheimer's Awareness Month, for the first time, all Alzheimer societies across Canada are coming together to wear a Forget Me Not flower as a reminder to forget no one, because no one should face dementia alone. This National Day of Significance also just happens to coincide with today's conversation, what you should know about dementia, with the incredible people on your screen. I'm going to pass things over to today's moderator, River Woods. River has been with the Alzheimer Society of BC for just over 2 years as the Rural and Remote Outreach Coordinator. They are a settler in the unceded territories of the Ktunaxa Nation and have been living in rural and remote communities for most of their years. Thank you, River, for being a part of this conversation today.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm so grateful to be joining, as Cassandra mentioned, from the unceded territory, the Ktunaxa Nation in the East Kootenay region of British Columbia. It's an honor to introduce our lived experience partners, Mark Breslaw and Ashley Sharma. And we are, of course, missing the presence of Eric Lee today, but look so forward to seeing him in the future. So we'd love to start out with introductions to our amazing lived experience partners. Mark Breslaw is a fitness enthusiast living in South Surrey with his wife and their 7-year-old son. He also has two young adult children who live nearby. At the age of 48, Mark received a diagnosis of young onset Alzheimer's disease after experiencing 2 years of progressive symptoms. With a robust career spanning more than 26 years, he held strategic leadership roles in human resources, including 19 years at TELUS Communications and the last 7 with Electronic Arts. Mark has made the conscious decision not to simply accept reality as is, but to thrive, not in spite of dementia, but actively with it. He is inspired to use his voice and his story to fight stigma and raise awareness. Mark, it's such a joy to have you here today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And our second lived experience partner, Ashley Sharma, is 26 years old and is a part-time live-in caregiver to her maternal grandmother, whom she calls Nanny G, who lives with dementia. Ashley lives in a multi-generational household and has been helping caregive for her grandmother since she was 20. Ashley and her nanny G love to sit and watch TV together or go on short drives to grab coffee. Outside of caregiving, Ashley is a full-time social worker and loves to read. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. Can't wait to hear everything you have to share.
Thank you so much, River. I'm so happy to be here with you all.
Awesome. So I believe next we have a poll to our audience. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the chat here or if our wonderful admin team is going to post a poll. But we're curious, what is one thing, audience, that you think everyone should know about dementia? So yes, if you want to pop your answers in the chat here over the next couple minutes, we would love to hear from you. Again, the question is, what is one thing you think everyone should know about dementia? Some fantastic answers coming in here. The person can still have a meaningful life. It's not a death sentence. Life can still be lived well. It's not just about memory loss. It can happen unexpectedly. Quality of life is the most important. There can be random and scary emotional changes, absolutely. Symptoms, how to handle them with empathy. A lot of grief for everyone. This is such a range of really, really important things to know about dementia. And when you know, and we do love this saying here at the Society, when you know a person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. Everyone's experience is different. Absolutely. It's not fun, but you still have to live your life as best as possible. And we hear that from our amazing lived experience partners. Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So, Mark and Ashley, we'd love to hear from you both about what your experience with dementia has been and how it's affected your life. Mark, if you're okay with going first, we'd love to hear how did your journey start and how has dementia changed your life?
Thank you for that question. I feel like I've told this story to so many different people in terms of the journey, but I know how important it is. I think that the answer to this will always evolve because the impact evolves from my perspective. But the journey really began for me in the fall of 2023. Um, it it really started off forgetting names and mixing up names, which I know that that can happen to so many people for so many different reasons. The only thing that was concerning me is that it wasn't just like sometimes I know you can mix up names in family or friend groups. It was happening a lot at work, or in my mind, it was happening more and more at work. And so I think the concern for me was it was increasing in frequency. And that felt different than, oh, it's stress or oh, you're not getting enough sleep, but not an alarm. I didn't have an alarm bell go off going, we have to do something here. And then what was happening, what I now know is something I think probably everyone here has heard the term executive function. And I had probably heard the term, but I didn't know what it was. And so essentially, where I was impacted by it in the early going and not knowing what executive function was, basically at work um, and at home, basic tasks were taking way longer. So at home, emptying the dishwasher, I would start emptying it and then I would just think about something else and I'd stop without even thinking in the middle of doing it, walk away, and just forget to do the dishwasher. I would forget steps, things that were like easy steps that nobody ever thinks twice about, or many people do not, which is, for me, it's again, loading the laundry. And these are not excuses, by the way, that I say to my wife, I can't do laundry and I can't do the dishwasher, just to be clear. But with laundry, I was doing loads of laundry on repeat that I never put soap in for, but never didn't realize. So like at home, they were like simple things like that. Again, chalk that up to the fast pace of life that we all live. Um, but then at work, I was really starting to notice that my ability to problem solve, make a decision, commit to something was being impacted by whatever was happening with me, and I felt like I was hiding it as well as I could by compensating by working just longer hours, including the weekends. Again, that's happened in my career at different times, maybe not to that extent, but I just chalked it up to this too shall pass. And then finally, in November of that year, 2023, I was driving home. I was about 500 feet away from my house at a four-way stop that I'd been to hundreds, if not, a couple thousand times since we had moved there many years ago. And I legitimately didn't know where I was. I had come to this, it's kind of like I came to the front of the four-way stop. I didn't know where I was. Like, nothing looked recognizable for, I'll never know the amount of time, but it felt long. And I eventually, something snapped back and I was eventually able to make my way home. Again, that became more jarring because that's a safety issue. And while I was thinking of should I say something or should I do something, it happened two more times between that November and December of 2023. At that point, I knew I needed to talk to my family doctor, and really like at that point, um, it's like that was the start of the journey. But it's like it's not really like now things start because for those of you who are on this call who have been through or are caring for somebody who's been through that process of going to your family doctor, especially at my age, going through the battery of tests of all the other things it can be or might be, which they generally start with it's not dementia and it's not even mild cognitive impairment. It could be these multitude of other things. And so that part of the process started. And I think I'll dovetail a little bit, if I could, to like, how did that impact me? I will start by saying this is not a doom and gloom story. It's so satisfying, inspiring to see how many people made that comment when the poll went out about, yeah, it's tough news for sure. It's incredibly hard to live like this, to have people worry for you. Yes, it's hard, but this is not a doom and gloom story in my experience. I will preface by saying this is my experience. The difficult parts for me, I would say right now, is the cognitive impairment. I actually feel it now, and I'm making more accommodations, and so far can still make some of those on my own, but I'm more frequently feeling it. It used to be like I have very good weeks, and then I have some tougher weeks, and now it's more like I have some very good days, but then there's some tougher days. So it's more frequent. I'm more aware of it. That you don't know what the next thing is. It could be years before the next thing. And so it reminds you of what you have when you're trying to kind of focus forward. And so, you know, I think though, and it talks somewhere, somebody mentioned here in a few of these comments about people that are caregivers or who are just helping in some capacity for loved ones. That's where I think for me, I actually think they have the bigger impact. This is from my point of view. And the reason I say that is because I think of in my own situation, they have to know how to help, but not overhelp. They have to know how to communicate, but in a certain tone. Um, they have life away from dementia, which is, because I'm in my 40s, my wife's in my 40s. No, my wife's not in my 40s. She's in her 40s. They're different 40s. Um, she has she's a job that she loves, working for an organization she believes in strongly. And so, and she's also raising a 7-year-old boy, and that comes with all the stresses of that. And so I worry about her. I worry about my mom and my brothers. Obviously, my kids, I worry about them. And I really wonder, like, will they be okay? Will they be able to take care of, like, what will they do to care for themselves? And so that's very much like when I get asked about impact, I say a little bit about me, but it's more I'm feeling the impact is much greater on those who don't know what's around the corner for them as somebody who loves me and wants to care for me. So that's really how I feel like it's impacted me. And then kind of the last thing I will say is when I step back and look from the beginning, when I was first diagnosed, the biggest impact I would say was leaving work, and not for the sake of, oh, I don't have a job or I'm stepping away. It was more from a perspective of I'm 48 years old at the time. I'm in the prime of my career. I have years of earning potential ahead of me, and all of a sudden something stops that. And you have to step away. And I don't want to focus on this specifically, but I think there are money issues, budget issues, financial situation issues, whether you're 40 years old or you're 80 or 90 years old when you have dementia. What I'll speak to is the complexities I think that are present in people who are younger. And for us, that meant, at the highest level, nothing changed for us in terms of expenses, but all of a sudden the earning potential did. And so we all of a sudden, the things we did to feel comfortable in life and not have to worry day to day about money, all of a sudden came to the forefront, and all these questions of, well, what about our purchases from the past? A mortgage, our house. Will we be able to pay our mortgage to the extent that it is? When we renew it, will it be renewed now that I have, we now have a single income earner in the house? Um, thinking about things that we have to pay for and focus on today, which are basic bills, the cost associated with, for anybody who's had a young child, all the activities and all the things that you do to care for them, and then think about the future. And this is really the hard one: is the piece we don't control. Is we don't, as everybody is, or many people commented about this, you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know when the corner is going to turn, and so we don't know what money we require or will require in the way of long-term care, in the way of in-home care, in the way of a daycare program, because I'm not there now. And so the part we struggle with too is like, how much is enough to save? And so for me, that's I don't, like I said, I don't want to focus on monetary. There are lots of things about not being at work that are quite positive, and I do want to focus and do focus more on that. And that is things like I have the time to spend with my kids like I haven't in many years. So, for my older kids, I have one's about to be 23-year-old son, and a daughter who's about to be 21. And they're showing up in different ways. I think that one of them is they're here right now taking care of our new puppy so that I can be here with you without a mini T-Rex, and also disguised as a Labradoodle, here disrupting all of us. But they've been here for a number of times just to visit. Sometimes we go out for a meal. The three of us went to a movie, around the October timeframe. For the first time, the three of us have gone for a movie since they were little kids. And so, and I'm able to go and spend more time with my son at the things that are events at the schools, like December concert. I just wasn't around for a lot of that, and so that's a huge win. And I'm reconnecting with friends that were super close from even high school, and I have the time to reconnect and really engage. And so I talked about worrying about money off the top, but actually, like, I know it's cliche to say this, I feel like a rich man because of the opportunity that's afforded to me with more time. So I think I probably taken three people's worth of time, and so I'll maybe stop there if that's okay.
Mark, thank you for everything you just shared. Every time I get to talk with you, I learn so much and you expand my perspective so much. And I think probably a lot of our audience members can feel that right now.
Thank you.
I really appreciate how much you shared about just like the daily things that you started noticing, executive function, um, changes, and then how jarring it must have been coming to that stop sign. And then I really appreciate how much you just shared about the financial considerations that I think maybe we don't hear a lot about, and people maybe don't think about until they're in that situation. So I just appreciate everything you shared. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that even though this isn't how you would have probably wanted it to happen, that you're able to spend more time with your kids, your family. You deserve that so much.
Thank you, River. I appreciate that.
Ashley, if you're ready to share, I'd love to hear about how your journey with your nanny G started and how has her living with dementia changed your life as a care partner and a granddaughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, River, and thank you, Mark, for sharing your story with someone who is living with dementia. And to give you some solace, I can give you the perspective of someone who's doing the caregiving, especially a very
That's
close
great.
loved one, right?
Yeah,
Um, I started living with my Naniji when I was 7 years old. My dad had died, and right after we, like the day of, we moved in with our grandparents because my mom became a single mother to three children overnight. And so my Nanniji was the first person that responded and was able to take me and my siblings to safety, to where we reside now, that we call the farmhouse. And from the age of 7 all the way up till 19, she was one of my primary caregivers. She cooked, she cleaned, she did the driving, she did the loving, the supporting, the hugs, the treatment for ailments. She was everything to the family. And to me, she was my superhero. Anything I ever needed, I would go directly to my nanny, and the answer or solution was there. Um, I remember when I graduated when I was 18 years old. I come from, just to give you some context, I come from an Indian household. So I not just live with my maternal grandmother, but my maternal grandfather, who I call my Nana, also lives there. For a period of time, it was also myself, my mom, and my 2 siblings. And then in the basement suites, I had my uncle, my aunt, and my 2 cousins. So there was a little too many people in the household. Now there's like 5 people, so it's okay. But now, when I was 18 and, she was kind of done with her caregiving part. Like she was finally starting to exit that role in her life. And I could see her retirement on the horizon. And someone who's given so much, not just to her family, but to the community, to people who that noticed her during her volunteer work. I was so excited for her retirement, and she told me when I graduated, the only thing she wanted was for me to get married. And I was like, I'm 18. We'll put a pin in that. I'll ask me in 10 years, and we'll see where we're at. And we're almost we're about 8 years later from that comment. And if you told me 8 years ago that this would be my life now, with my nanny, I wouldn't have believed you. Uh, Prior to my nanny really falling ill, we didn't have any idea that this was dementia. At the time, like when I was around 18, we did notice my grandma getting more antsy. Just like irritable, any conversation that we would have that never bugged her before was starting to really get at her, and she would stick on those conversations over and over again, where we may have told her like, "Hey, we've already hashed this out. Why are you still angry about it?" And we thought at the time, like, oh, we've given her a lot of trouble over her life. If there's any good time to be angry, let it be in your retirement. Like, okay, you guys can take care of yourselves. I'm out. So that was what our family's assumption was. Um, and then when I was around 20 years old, she just started to decline more cognitively. There was days where she would just be sitting in the living room waiting for my grandfather to come home from the fields, and he had already been home for an hour. And I'd sit with her in the living room like, "Hey, what you doing?" And she'd be saying, "I'm waiting for your grandfather." And I'm like, "He's in the kitchen." And she's like, "Oh, okay, great. I'll go talk to him." And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't think twice. In a position as a grandchild, especially in our culture and in the Indian household, I don't have a lot of power, and I don't have a lot of decision making. So for me to say anything bad about my grandmother was like, "Oh, don't you dare." And so I was like, "I'm not going to say anything. I'll just love her." And when she started to get worse, it was hard for her to cognitively like explain what was going on with her. Also in our culture, if something's going on, you just kind of take it on yourself. You take care of it yourself, you take care of it within the family, and resolve the issue at hand. But there is no resolve to dementia. There is no cure. And at the time, like we had no family history. My grandmother never smoked, she never drank, she had a completely vegetarian diet. She was a very, very healthy individual. One day, she decided to walk to a subway that is close to our house. She had never walked there before. She had always driven. She had her driver's license. But she decided to walk one day. And I remember her coming home with like a bottles and bottles of orange juice from the subway. Not a sandwich, but just the orange juices. And we still didn't think of much at the time. We just thought, okay, it's just her being her. Maybe it's a new thing that she likes to do. Um, one day when I was 20, she was on her bed and told me, or my mom and my aunt, that she couldn't feel one side of her arm. And so we thought it was a stroke. And so we ended up calling 911. And this was COVID times. Like, we were just, getting over the biggest hump of COVID. So we weren't able to go into the hospital with her. My aunt and my mom had to stay outside while the doctor sat with her and tried to figure out what was going on for her. And eventually, a little later, it was necessary for my aunt and my mom to help with my grandma because she couldn't cognitively understand the doctors, and that's where they sat down with my grandfather, my mom, and my aunt and said most likely the case for her was she was experiencing her symptoms of frontal temporal lobe dementia. They hadn't done any MRIs, any X-rays. There was no medical tests that were done at the time. There still hasn't been, but just with the verbal understanding and just like that family information of what had been going on for her, that's when we got the diagnosis, right? But I think of what a lot of people forget is dementia doesn't start with the diagnosis. Dementia starts a long time before that diagnosis. And I think there's a lot of misconception of what dementia looks like. And for people, they think, okay, it happens overnight, and it really doesn't. This is a very gradual, deterioration. And, there's like, with early detection and like those conversations that we could have had earlier on may have helped us in our caregiving journey with our grandmother and how she wanted to be cared for. Um, After that time in the hospital, she also started to experience aphasia. So aphasia is when you cannot understand verbal language and cannot give that output, like language output. So that's what my grandma experiences. She has few words now that she can say. She can only speak Punjabi now, where when she was well, she spoke four languages. And so it's a big difference for me and my grandma. When I decided to become a caregiver, it wasn't a sit down conversation of like, okay, I'm going to caregive for my grandma and this is what my life is going to be like. I almost slid into the role because I loved her as a granddaughter and I would want nothing to happen to her. Um, Unfortunately, with that, and especially me being so young at the time, I made so many mistakes, and I have so much guilt and regret about those mistakes. But as caregivers, I think it's a big thing that we can talk about, and to talk about those regrets and mistakes we made, and maybe initial caregiving. For example, a lot of the times she would argue with me, and cognitively, I knew not to argue back because she didn't know what she was saying. However, I was 20 and would argue back with her. There was times where I felt like maybe she never loved me. Maybe this was all the frustration coming out because of all that I made her do when I was a teenager. I was also a little bit of a troublesome teenager, right? And so there was a lot of emotions, not just from her dementia coming up, but from our past family traumas, how our family functioned before. I grew up in a very Western world. Both my parents were born in Canada. I was born in Canada. And so I have a very Western view of things where my grandparents don't, right? And so a lot of my care towards my grandma was Westernized. It was structured. It was take your medicine, eat your meals. You're going to do what I say because it's going to make you well. But that didn't work. It really didn't work out for me and my grandma. And I came to my breaking point where I was crying almost every day, not knowing what I can do for her. And that's when I reached out to the Alzheimer's Society of B.C. And I reached out to the South Asian line. And this wonderful woman, Jyoti, was able to support me in understanding dementia and also the cultural aspects of dementia, where, I'm a granddaughter in this Indian household living in a multi-generational household. How can I support my grandma while still being a granddaughter? Because those roles in our families mean a lot to us, like our roles. But that's how it kind of started, my caregiving experience with my grandma.
Oh my goodness, Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your story and for all the cultural context that you've given many of us who did not grow up in a Indian household or don't have that Punjabi, like that cultural background. And I'm I'm so glad that you were able to be supported by Jyoti, and it just shows the how important it is to have those culturally specific resources and that knowledge. You're an incredible human being. I'm sure you hear this a lot. And the fact that you've been doing this for the last, 6 years from the age of, well, 18 and on, and I think any of us would have made those mistakes. You're just doing your very best in a very tough situation. And your nanny G sounds like an amazing woman. Thank you so much for sharing this part of your lives with us. You two have been through so much together, and I'm glad you have each other.
Thank you, River.
Our next question that we'd like to propose to both of you, and I know I certainly want to hear, and I'm sure our audience does, is what has helped you feel supported in your journey with dementia as someone living with dementia and also someone being a care partner in dementia, and what hasn't? So, Mark, I'd like to go to you first. And if you could share 1 to 2 specific examples of what has been most helpful to you and your family, and 1 to 2 things that you found not helpful or challenging.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to cheat a little. There was something I had in my notes that I didn't say in the last answer, but ties to what has helped. Um, with all that I said about the monetary stuff, I do want to point out I have a great deal of gratitude. I know that there are people in far worse situations who are dealing with dementia, who have far worse economic issues. So, I'm very grateful. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm on disability. The reality is that I have an employer who had a great benefits plan that I was part of, an employer who has continues to have empathy and care, and wants to be supportive. And I know not everybody has that, and so I feel grateful for that. So I didn't want to have that go by and not talk a little bit about the gratitude I have, because I know others don't have some of those advantages, I'll call them. So I think that I can dovetail that into the question, because the support from my employer has been great. That has helped immensely. I know, sometimes, again, a cliche is, we say people don't leave jobs, they leave managers or they leave leaders. And, it's probably very true. In my case, the way my manager responded to my news, she was the first one I told at work. Some people wait till the very end to tell their manager, but she also is a friend. We joined Electronic Arts around the same time. And her response to it, this is not paraphrasing, this is a direct quote. She said, "I'm here for any and all of it." And she said, "I'm here for any and all of the journey." And to have somebody say that to you in a professional context, even though I knew we were friends as well, was huge. It just a big weight lifted off me. That was super helpful. That friendship continues. And I still have so many colleagues that have reached out, certainly in the last few weeks with some of the social media posts. It's just been great. And I'm super grateful for that. Um, I would say, under the big umbrella of things that went well, that didn't start that way, were information. When I was in that zone of, like, it could be these 9 different things, um, I was I was obsessing. Maybe not obsessing is the right word. I just could not get enough information about. I don't think it's ADHD. I don't think it's this, because I have that, and I've never presented this way. And and then when I realized we were getting closer, because I had had a couple of cognitive tests. For those who know, is the MOCA and the I forget the acronym. The acronym is MMSC, I think, is the other one. So I had low scores in both of them, and so as my family doctor was starting to say, like, yeah, this is starting to look more like, at least mild cognitive impairment. Um, it was I then I was researching everything to do with young onset, just dementia in general, young onset Alzheimer's versus young onset dementia in general. And there is remarkably not a lot out there. And so the reason I bring this up as things that went well is, I went from like literally reading research papers. This was kind of before Chat GPT as a research model kind of really took off. And now I do use that, but I've educated on myself on how to use that properly. Um, but this is where, like Ashley told her story, I even forget who gave me the recommendation to call the Dementia Link helpline. I didn't have a diagnosis. We were, like I said, we were leaning towards it being cognitive impairment of some sort. And somebody just said, you know, this is society exists, the Alzheimer Society of B.C, and they have this line. And so I remember I was at my mom's house, and I thought, I'm just going to call. And so I called, and I gave him a quick introduction. I said, I don't have a diagnosis, so maybe I'm calling too early, or maybe I won't have to call at all. But I just thought, I'm starving for information. I feel like this line is, its purpose is to help people through kind of void of information. And I've said on a previous webinar that that call, just that short call, initial call, the person on the other end said, it doesn't matter if you have a diagnosis or not. You have something cognitively that's happening. We're happy to talk to you. We're happy to help you through whatever the process is, the journey is. If it's just this call, we hope that's helpful too. And then they committed to, you know, every few weeks we're going to reach out. If you're okay, we're going to reach out and just check in. And honestly, I took that sort of as like, that's a really nice comment. Sounds like a pretty big commitment. I can't imagine you can deliver on that for everybody you talk to. Uh, and so what I got out of that first call though was the first time I felt validated. And what I mean by that is, and I'll talk about it, I think, a little bit later if I get the opportunity, is there's so many people saying it has to be something else. You're too young. We don't know anybody who has that. You know, a lot of people will associate young onset as what they saw if they saw the movie. Now I forget the name of the movie. Still Alice. Like, I didn't have dementia, didn't know anybody with dementia. I remember watching it in the theater and thought that was one of the most powerful movies I had ever seen. And now I've watched it like a dozen times since. But that's what I think a lot of people think. And they're like, you're not like that. You don't look like that. You're not, you know, a lot of people didn't know that I was getting lost on the way home. You don't, it doesn't feel like that's the face of you. And so in that call, I felt validated because across from me, nobody was saying, hey, like, but have you tried this and have you checked that? Because it's really unlikely that, and the rare, so rare that somebody your age can get it. And so I think, like, you know, tried to divert me to another path. They just said, we're here for you, whatever the diagnosis is. And I didn't realize how badly I needed that validation as I did when I made that call. And sure enough, the story goes, a few weeks later, I have a call, and we all get so many calls that have the weirdest, you know, names of people who are calling us. But this said Alzheimer Society of B.C, and I didn't even remember that they said they were going to call it picked up. And sure enough, they just said we're just checking in, and I was able to give them an update on where I was with my doctor, and you know, by that point, I got a neurologist, and so that was a, for anybody wondering, or for anybody who is a family member or a friend of somebody you're wondering about, call. I mean, I just that was I went from having a void of information to having a very supportive and empathetic voice, no matter who I was talking to on the other end, and and um, and also I now had access to this website that had this plethora of information and people who are willing to talk to you about it if it got overwhelming. And I mean, you can't. I couldn't have. I didn't know that I could not ask for more than that. Um, and then I'd say the final thing that really helped was, although when I introduced my journey, it may not have sounded like I did something fast enough, which I put my hand up and maybe say like I probably should have done something immediately the first time I didn't know where I was. Um, but getting help as fast as I did, because I learned later that somebody my age, it takes a lot longer to diagnose because of all the other things it could be and how rare that diagnosis is. And so I think just early intervention and you know, I can't say it enough how important that is. And I know, you know, we hear a lot about men who have trouble talking about some of the things that they go through. Certainly with mental health, you hear a lot of stories about that. I didn't it wasn't an ego thing for me of being a man. It was more like I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like I didn't know dementia. So that are the things that really helped, or those are the things that really helped. On the not so good side, I'm going to kind of expand on what I said earlier. And I want to preface what I'm saying by saying that when I give examples of what I'm about to, none of these people that were saying these things were ill intentioned. I know that. I know that in my heart of hearts, but I also know how if I just feel it for a second on me, how it made me feel. So basically, talking about mental health as an example, just refer to it. I think that the things that mental health and mental illness have in common with uh, dementia is maybe more than we would think. I think the biggest one for me it's an invisible disease. People can't see it. Maybe when it gets advanced, obviously people can see something, but they don't know necessarily what that something is. And so I think because of it being invisible, um, I think we do. I think both diseases fall victim. Sometimes maybe the wrong word, but fall victim to stigma. And stigma comes in many forms. And like somebody said at the top of this call, everybody has a different experience. Sometimes they don't feel stigma. They just have a great environment around them. And then the stigma comes from well-intentioned people. You don't know that the way you receive it, though, is as a bit of a stigma. And so, as I've said earlier, I've had a lot of people in my family and my friends who still say things like, if I say something like, "Oh, the dishwasher," or my son, the joke around our house, we try to use humor a lot to the degree that you can. We do use it a lot. And so my wife once sent me, she said, I proposed that we play a game so my son's name is Michael, and the game was, where is Michael's Cheerios today? Where are Michael's Cheerios today? Because they're in a little container. And, I was randomly putting them in different places, and she had good fun with it, and I'm very much can laugh at that because there's no danger in that. um, but when I would tell people stuff like that, they'd be like, "Oh, like that happens to me too." Like sometimes I just get so scatterbrained. It happens to me too, and that phrasing, "It happens to me too," they are not ill intending, but that phrasing of "it happens to me too" is almost to me taking away or proving what I was getting in validation from the helpline, and removing it from me, kind of saying it's got to be something else, right? So sometimes I would say, I really like in my gut, I know my body, and I feel like it's not these things. And I'd have loved ones say to me, it has to be something that not. And I think if it was dementia, they would have figured it out by now. Or don't get too far ahead of yourself. You don't even have a diagnosis. And so I think when I reason with it, if I put myself in their shoes, it's their way of coping sometimes. So, when my mom says it, my mom's faced with looking at her son who has this happening, and we know the disease is awful, but we don't know what the journey and the outcome will be. But it's a dark one for somebody who feels like this is happening in reverse. It's not supposed to happen to my son who's much younger than me. And so she uses it a bit as a coping mechanism to kind of go, I haven't digested it yet. And so in my head, it can't be this because I'm not ready for that. So I think that is what has been the hardest, because it's even with the diagnosis now, I thought all of that would go away. But it hasn't. And again, I think it's just sometimes it's coping, and sometimes it just naturally comes out where they're like, I don't want him to feel so bad. I don't want him to feel different. So I say, oh yeah, I get that too. So I'd say that is probably the one that stands out for me as to what wasn't helpful. But again, I know these individuals in my life were not ill intentioned in what they were trying to do.
Mark, yet again, you have just given us so much information and perspective. I took so much away from what you just shared, but things that really stood out for me were the importance of our social safety nets in Canada, and especially with our employers, how important that is. And I don't know if anybody in our audience today is a manager or a supervisor, but just knowing how to support your employees and creating a safe space, that's so important. And I'm sure you've just planted a lot of seeds there. as you do. So thank you for that. And what you shared about not the things that are not helpful is going to take us into our, or is going to be helpful in our next question. But before we get to that, I would very much love to hear from Ashley. If you have a few specific examples of what's been most helpful to you as a caregiver for your nanny G, and also one or two things you found not helpful or challenging in your experiences.
Yeah, thank you, River. Yeah, for me as a caregiver, I think one of the most like fundamental things that shifted my caregiving and also helped me help me accept my circumstances now that my family structure has changed, was really honoring myself throughout that role. Not just as a caregiver, but who was I originally? Who was I before this, right? Because I would always tell people, it's like, yes, my nanny can't do what she used to, but it doesn't make her any less valuable to anybody. To me, she's still my golden star, my superhero. And I've sat down with her and I've told her, like, you can stop speaking, you can stop eating, you can stop walking, but you're still my superhero. That won't change. And for me, reverting back to that granddaughter role, when my grandma can do those grandma things. And right now, like at this time in her life, all she can do is like give me a kiss on the head. And that's how I see our connection still, right? So it's focusing on what she can do versus what she can't do, and focusing on what I can do, and accepting what I can't do. Right? Because as caregivers, especially with loved ones, and Mark, you might see this with your family and people who love you very much, they almost want to do it all for you. But at the end of the day, the caregiver can't do it all. Right. We just don't have that capacity. And also it's the person with living with dementia, it's their own journey, right? And giving them their bits of autonomy in this and how they would like to be cared for. So that's been one very helpful thing. I think the challenges that I've had with caregiving and things that might not be so helpful is I guess there is a struggle right now, at least in my experience, in navigating the healthcare system as an Indian woman, as a younger person, even with myself, like I had a diagnosis of celiac disease a couple of years ago, and we didn't have a family history, and so the doctors didn't even think about it, and so I suffered for years without a diagnosis, right? And my grandma, it's really hard because I feel like my grandma's been treated the same way. By the time we got to the hospital, and we still haven't found any like medical like support in that regard. But it's almost like because my grandma cannot advocate for herself, nobody cares. Right. I hear often a lot. It's like, okay, well, she's at her end stages, or she's too far gone, or because she can't speak for herself, like it's kind of whatever. But at the end of the day, she's still very much alive. She smiles. She's able to interact with her environment. Just because she doesn't contribute in the way a typical person was doesn't make her any less than. Right. And I think people forget that a lot, especially with people with dementia. It's like a lot of the focus is on what they can't do. And I'm like, these people are still very much human with emotions, with thoughts, with hopes and dreams, whatever that may be. Right. And I think for us is, ensuring that quality of care to people, and that culturally sensitive care. I was very lucky. The past couple weeks, unfortunately, my nanny was sick, and because she is also older, she had just turned 80 last year. It's very hard for her to fight off infections, and so she needed medical treatment in order for her to stabilize herself. Um, and you can see the difference in care and acknowledgement. You don't have to come from an Indian family or an Indian background to care, or to learn a couple of words, right? In the lower mainland, especially, we have a huge amount of our South Asian community. And I had, care aides from various like nationalities and backgrounds, and some with just like a very small word, whether it be like Hanji or no, or like, trying to figure out something for her in her language really made the difference, right? Rather than ignoring her or saying, okay, is there someone else that can help out with this that's Indian, right? It's like you don't have to be. And don't be afraid of even asking a question or asking, like, how do you say this in Punjabi so I can help your grandma feel more comfortable, right? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Or if you can't say it right, like I can barely speak Punjabi, right? So don't worry about it. So yeah, not being afraid to engage. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And I can only imagine sometimes the struggle of being taken seriously and listened to as as a young woman, as a care partner of, as you said, an Indian woman, and without having that and just kind of being ignored when that don't have that in your family background. So you've had to advocate really hard for yourself and for your family. And that's a lot to be proud of. No wonder you became a social worker. Um,
It's all
I
because of my Naniji. Like she's the one that's taught me my empathy, my caring
Mhm.
for others. And I'm like, if I were to ever honor her in this lifetime, the best thing I can do is to, show me what she's taught me. Right? All this comes from my Nani.
You've certainly taken the lead on that and are doing amazing things with it. I also really appreciated what you shared about just making those little efforts. They can go such a long way in learning someone's language, a word in someone's language, and how incredibly important it is that we recognize that no matter the state that someone's in, they're still an individual. They still deserve dignity and care, and to have to participate in that, and to be seen as a whole person. So thank you so much for sharing that. Last but not least, our last question to you both, Mark and Ashley, is for people who care but feel unsure about how to show up. What would you want them to understand? And you've both spoken to this a little bit already, but Mark, I'll go to you first. What do you want people to most understand when they're not sure about how to show up for someone living with dementia, and actually someone who is a caregiver?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I'd say less is more for me right now. And what I mean by that is the example I gave of my manager saying to me, I'm here for the journey, I'm here for any and all of it. It was an acknowledgement of this is a journey, meaning I may not need your help now. And I would say I'm very happy to report that I can still do a lot independently, minus the fact that I now have a furry T-Rex as a puppy, and that puppy's taken over my life. But prior to that and after that, if that ever ends, I can't drive anymore. I may have mentioned that before. I can't remember, but I can't drive anymore. And so, to take off of something Ashley said is like focus. Kind of to use the car term again. I'll admit this is probably a cliche, but that saying that there's a reason the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror it means a lot to me. It means that I have dementia, and yes, there are things I can't do anymore. But that big windshield are all the things I can still do. And so, I I think that it's been so long since people heard that this was my diagnosis, and they haven't heard from me saying, "Hey, I need help." Some of them actually feel like I don't even want to reach out because I'm not. I don't. I don't feel like I'm helping them at all. And so I think it's find your own way. Uh, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. It's okay to check in if you want. Don't feel like, hey, I have to bottle it up because he's not talking to me. Um, so I think it's like, and also, but kind of back to something I said is it's those people that I feel they have the most impact is people who care for you. So, like, be. I often get the advice to be kind to yourself. I want those individuals, friends, family, direct caregivers to feel kind, like find the kindness for themselves. But I'll tell a very short story to give a real life example. I have a very good friend of mine, probably certainly one of my very best friends for since high school. and he lives near me, and we always get together like for a dinner or a coffee or lunch. I'd say now, kind of, because he's got a very busy life with three kids and a full time job, but we find the time. And the last time I reached out to him was sharing with him some of the stuff that was going to come out about my story as part of this awareness month that we're closing on here. And I thanked him. I said, I just want to thank you because you've been a true champion. You understood why I wanted to do this work, and it's now coming to fruition. So I just wanted to thank you for championing me, my desire to go in that direction. And his response was very him, but like his response to me was, I don't feel like I'm helping you enough. And my response, this will be a paraphrase because it's in a text message, but I basically said to him, I'm not expecting you to help. Like, I'm expecting you to show up as my friend. If you're my mom, show up as my mom. If you're my dad, show up as my dad. I don't need you to necessarily show up as something else. And so you're helping me is just like a friend helping another friend on something that's far less of a tougher topic to talk about. And so I just said, like, I just thank you for championing me. That is being a friend, and so therefore you are helping. And so it's kind of my release to say it's okay. There's nothing more you have to do. And I know, and I've said to people, I know that's going to change. So as an example, I wasn't asking my older kids for a lot of help, but here they are here today, with the T-Rex, helping for a few hours at our house. And I had a couple calls last week that they came to spend time for, or just to drop a line and say, hey, Dad, do you want to go out for a meal or something? And it's just being there. Everyone has a different role in what they feel they can help and not help. But it's just like I want people to just play their role and kind of follow the lead of the person. Obviously, I'm talking from somebody who's in a more mild stage. It's probably different. I imagine it's very different when it's late stages. But just remind them that they are playing a role, and sometimes just being ready for that call when it might come in the future is playing a role. So that's kind of what I would say to people who are kind of wondering how they should approach me and approach kind of the gravity of the situation or not. It's kind of my perspective on it.
Thank you so much. I think that's tremendously helpful. And I think all of us have had an experience where we're not sure how to show up for someone, and that is amazing advice. So thank you for that. Ashley, for you, what would be one or two things that you would suggest to folks who care but feel unsure of how to show up for you and your family?
Yes, for sure, River. Yeah, for my experience as a caregiver and people wanting to show up for caregivers, yeah, I think it's always an interesting thing. Like even if it's not dementia, just like even like with death, like how to support your friends and family through something major, a major life event or a major change in your family has happened. And I'm very lucky to have a couple of very good friends. I'm also very lucky to be able to afford ongoing therapy, that type of support to support myself. For my like informal supports, like my friends, the best ways that I've found that they show up for me is when they do ask about her. Yeah, so when like they're not afraid, and it's like not just ask about like my caregiving and my caregiving experience, but ask about my grandma directly, like how was her day today? Or like, I love it when people ask me, like, can you tell me a bit about her? Like, what's some stories about her? Because I keep saying, like, I love her. She's my superhero. Well, why? And it's like, let me tell you about her. Let me tell you how amazing she is. Um, but yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions to like oftentimes as caregivers, especially in my role, like, and I tell people my 9 to 5 is my full-time job and my 5 to 9 is grandma, so I don't have a lot of time in between. However, through my caregiving experience, I've learned it is incredibly important to have that sectioned time for yourself, whether that's hours or even days at times, right? To let go of that caregiving role to make sure you take care of yourself, so you're able to adequately take care of your loved one. So not being afraid to, give your friend a call who's caregiving and saying, hey, I know you're super busy in life. I just wanted to call and check in. Do you want to go out for coffee? in our current circumstances, it's a bit hard with having people come in for my grandma because she has a lot of needs. And since coming back from the hospital, like our house kind of become hospitalized a little bit. So it's a little tricky to have guests over. But to, yeah, just offer like, what can I do to love you better or, support you in that way? And don't be afraid to ask those questions. Yeah, as a caregiver, I think that's like one of the biggest things. For me and my friends, we have like bi-weekly little luncheons. So that's our like hour together, and it's a beautiful hour to just escape that caregiving role or to be able to just vent, right? But just being there, you don't have to become a superhero for people, right? Like I said with my caregiving, like we do not have that kind of capacity or powers. But like how Mark said, sometimes just showing up as you are, showing up as a friend, sitting down to listen, even if you don't speak and hear me speak for the hour straight, and you're content with that, that is a blessing to me.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I think what you shared, especially about your friends, especially being 26 and how that impacts your social life. So having friends who are willing, not willing, but excited to do that with you and also hold space for you to be human and talk about all the hard stuff, but maybe sometimes just like normal or not normal, but like everyday stuff as well.
Yeah,
And
it's
allow you to be
interesting.
yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting at my age. I think I've said it in a session before, but a lot of my friends are getting married, having babies, and doing that part of caregiving. And I'm like, I'm a little bit later, so I'm kind of doing life in reverse almost. And so it's like I can almost relate to you. It's like when they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll change my kid's diaper or stuff," and I'm like, "I'll change my grandma's like pad and bedding," and I'm like, "It's close, but not almost there, but kind of relate."
Like, thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, we're very on mute.
Thank you so much. Rookie mistake. It's a lovely audience. We've heard from our two panelists here about so much of their insight and experiences. Now we'd like to hand it over to you for a Q&A session. So we'll have about 10 minutes for you to post your questions. If you've posted them earlier and it's something the panelists haven't answered, yet for you in their own way. You can post it again in here, and Kim and Cassandra will be monitoring that. So I'll hand that over to them.
Thank you, River. Um, there has been a lot of comments and sharing experiences around family dynamics, and sometimes when relationships can be complicated or complex, even predating a dementia diagnosis. And there was a question around what to do if the caregiver does not speak to the person living with dementia respectfully, and how might we address that, or what are some strategies that we could help advocate in that situation? And Ashley, I see you'd like to take that question on. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I was one of those caregivers who wasn't speaking very respectfully to my grandma. I'm happy to own that mistake in my life. And with my family, it's a little bit different because we have three caregivers for my grandma. It's myself, my grandfather, and my aunt. In reading some of the chats, my family has a very long and complicated traumatic history, starting with like their immigration from India to Canada and even their lives in India, that have surfaced throughout this caregiving that we may have just swept under the rug if everything was quote unquote okay in our family. Um, but one of the hard parts, like, was that respectful speaking and ensuring that the care, like all of us as caregivers, were talking to my grandma, even if she could like understand us fully or not, but with like love, kindness, and respect. And so for me, lucky enough, like, I had the therapy and insight to realize the damage I was causing to my relationship with my grandma. So if you're having a caregiver or a loved one who's the primary caregiver to a person who's living with dementia, I can't speak for them. I can tell you where my language came out of was frustration. Um, a lot of what I wanted to tell my grandma was I loved her, but because of our change in communication, my lack of awareness of what dementia was like and how it can really impact her, our communication was very toxic. Right. I was able to reach out to Alzheimer's BC, and they were able to explain a bit more about how to have those good conversations, right? Because it doesn't just affect your loved one with dementia and how they experience it, it also affects your quality of caregiving. So my greatest encouragement to anybody who's struggling with that conversation with their loved one or having those tough conversations or those traumatic histories or pasts that are coming out because of, caregiving and dementia is to if you have capacity, therapy has been great for me. Calling the Alzheimer's Society of BC are fantastic supports. That's where I learned the most about my communication skills with my grandma. And then if it's not yourself and it's a loved one who is caring for someone with dementia, maybe just sit down with them and ask them like, hey, are you frustrated? Like, I've noticed this change in you where they may not have been like this before, right? It's like how can I support you better? It's like, or like that's just having those conversations and not being afraid of those conversations.
Thank you so much. Excellent advice there. And you're right. Often we can be coming from a place of exhaustion, of caregiver burnout, or a lack of understanding around the disease. And there's so many misconceptions out there. If family can attend education together, that can be so helpful, just ensuring everyone's on the same page. But thank you for addressing that question, Ashley. I see there are some questions around help. So one question specifically, what might you do if the person living with dementia is refusing to accept help? I don't know if that's a situation that resonates.
Probably with Ashley more than me. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I also come from that cultural aspect. A lot of and it's the same with my family there because my grandfather is what I would consider the primary caregiver to my grandmother. He also has her power of attorney. Me and my grandfather have very different views on my grandma's care because he's very Eastern care and I'm very Western care, and I'm like, okay, we got to meet somewhere in the middle. And so, yeah, just having sorry, Kim, could you repeat the question so I make sure I'm not like uh repeating
Just,
myself too?
no, just around any strategies if the person living with dementia is
Yeah.
maybe refusing care or not
Yeah.
open to having that conversation.
And exactly, I think just bouncing off what I was saying before, it's like we all have different views of care, right? And what our care is going to look like. I have an idea of care for my grandma, and for me, if she could live in a gold star palace, she would. Right. But for my grandfather, he likes it more natural, right? He doesn't want so many systems involved. Both of my grandparents have very traumatic histories when they first immigrated to Canada with the medical system and being very mistreated in the medical system. So now, coming on my grandma's dementia, he is horrified of hospitals, ERs. Even her last visit to the ER, he was very, very nervous the entire time. And it took us not a very long time, but it took us almost a week to convince him, like, hey, she needs more help. Let's send her to the ER, right? So understanding where that apprehension of wanting support comes from. Is it because of a traumatic past? Is it because they feel like they're not okay? It says, for example, refusing getting dressed, refusing ready bed at night, results same clothes for multiple days. So yeah, for example, like my grandma started to do that when she had her first when it was cognitively declining. And it's like, okay, what am I going to fight about with my grandma today, right? Where is her autonomy in this? And I think a lot of people with dementia lose so much autonomy through biology and then also through society, right? Like, oh, well, you're not making good choices for yourself. Are the same clothes that they're wearing, are they soiled, right? They're not soiled? Okay, you can have your autonomy, wear your clothes, right? Um, refusing help getting dressed, like, at some point, is it like a safety concern, right? And if it's a safety concern, that's another conversation. But embracing their autonomy and that, they're still very much a human that can make those decisions, right? It's very hard when it's decisions that that they may not have made if they were fully cognitively there, or maybe could have a full conversation with them. And yeah, as a caregiver, accepting what they're not willing to accept. And my intervention comes when things are no longer safe, right? Rather than like a decision or like a lifestyle, right? That's how I see it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that response. And yeah, putting that into the context that many care
Yeah.
tasks, it puts you in a very vulnerable position.
Exactly. I see, sorry, Dana's question as well, where it says if the safety concern is like excessive alcohol drinking, right? And if they're still drinking alcohol with their dementia diagnosis, if you have that concern that, let's say they have necessary medication or the alcohol has made things worse, if they've had falls with alcohol, there's also I forgot exactly the name of the place. I think it's CLBC that takes care of safety concerns regarding vulnerable adults. But if you have hospital, yeah, lying drunk after a fall, right? It's hard, but you can give like what we call centralized screening a call for Community Living BC with concerns for a vulnerable adult in the community. It's hard, especially if they've already been to the hospital, and most likely what I would see in my experience with my grandma is they'll speak to social workers, and if they still have that autonomy and they're cognitively well, it is their right and choice. It's very, very hard as a caregiver seeing people make choices that maybe aren't the best for them, or their life could be better if they had made different choices, right? And for us as caregivers, it's accepting that hard part, right? We can only do so much and guide them and love them so much. But at the end of the day, if they're making these choices, respect their choices, and, you intervene in safety reasons.
Thank you so much, Ashley. There was another question related to help. When family and friends may come and ask, "What can I do?" and the person sharing is afraid to ask for too much. And I think that comes instinctually for a lot of us. We don't want people to take on our struggles sometimes. And anything you might share when it comes to maybe accepting help or conversations you've had with friends and family who have offered help, and how might you overcome your initial hesitancy to accept it?
I don't mind starting.
Thanks.
So I think, my perspective on that is that I think that most people in your circle of care and support, they want to help. I do think that it's like the two worlds are colliding when you feel like I don't want to ask for help because they have their own stuff going on and they're like, I know this is going on with Mark, whoever, and but I'm not hearing from him. So is he not comfortable with my help? So I think it's so you almost like two parties are overthinking their side of the thing. I just think like my I said earlier in this call that my attitude is pretty much like I don't need your help right now. And so telling people like I don't need it now, but here's what it might look like when I do. In terms of me reaching out to you, you don't have to constantly check with me. Now I realize there'll be a time where I can't necessarily advocate for myself and directly ask for the help I think our family needs. But what I've been amazed at when we first announced that I had this diagnosis with very close family, very close friends, and some very close colleagues, is everybody started writing back like it was almost like they had a script that said like we're here for the journey, and so the journey can look so small. So I too have had trouble. So I can give you a real life example of asking my mom. My mom's, I don't want to say her age because she'll never talk to me again, but she's older than me, looks way younger than me. But she lives in Vancouver. And so she has a car and she drives fine, but ask her to come all the way out to South Surrey. to help me to get groceries just seems like that's not a big enough reason. Like people can deliver groceries, but on her side, she wants to help a lot. And so I've really opened up. I'm kind of doing in reverse of how I communicated my news. Started with family first. And so that's where I'm starting to ask for help. And I think as things progress over time, I think I'll eventually get to those close friends where we need help, or it'll be my wife calling or somebody else in my circle of people that love me. So it's not all on the person with dementia to ask for all the help. And so I think, you sometimes people will ask you, and in my case, I've recently, because I can't drive, there's things that I couldn't even fathom planning for. Say, like, my wife has a late meeting at the office. Who's going to pick up our son from after school care? So, it's come almost from great necessity that having to have reach out, which is maybe the easier way is to find a good need and to not pin it all on one person. So there's stuff I've asked my brother to do. There's stuff that I've asked my mom to do. And I saw somebody mention like, it's some of the stuff that I assume the husband is the one with the diagnosis. Is some of the stuff he used to do and can't do, and I don't feel like, I don't feel comfortable necessarily asking for something my husband used to do. And I totally get that because I'm aware of the things I can't do. I can still say to my wife, like, we need help with that. I don't, I can ask my brother to change a light bulb that needs ladders way beyond any length that I should be climbing up. And I guess, just let people in and react the way they will. The worst thing somebody can say is it's inconvenient for me right now. But I imagine most people have a village of people who will support. So you can go to that next person, and that person who says they can't help right now because they may be off on vacation or they're away from work. A number of things. It's not because they don't want to help. It's just right now they can't help you with that thing. So you have other people that you can go to, and I think it's something that people will. I will struggle with it as long as I can, have my faculties to ask for help. I will do that. So I don't. That certainly was far from a perfect answer, but that was like it's a real. Just so you can feel like this is you're not the only one. I feel it as the one with the disease. I feel I can see. Like I said off the top, I'm so aware of the things I can't do, or if I did them, they would take me 10 times longer than somebody else. And so I see the things that I would normally jump in and do and can't do. And so I'm very clear also with my wife or whoever the caregiver is to say, I don't expect you to do this all. Like you have other stuff. And so the default is I need to ask for help. And I think it's how you message that with the people you need help from. I'm not asking you for help to be around for a day or multiple days. It's just this one little thing. And so I think it's going to be trial and error for me. And I totally, I empathize with the question that's being asked because it is hard. And I think so much of dementia is trial and error, no matter your role of being the one with it or caring for the one that has it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer to that question. And I think it's part of our human nature to struggle with asking and accepting help. I have heard that some people find it helpful as a family to come up with a list of things, and then, like you said, spread it out because most of us do have kind of a network that we
Mm.
have built, and a lot of people want to help, but they don't know how to ask or they don't know what is needed. And so just having that tool ready, and it is something that we actually go over in some of our education, which can be helpful. But thank you. Um, do we have time for one more question? I, I, s- I see one.
And so, yes.
Okay, thank you. I see one that might be for you, Mark. The question is, my biggest challenge is fear of the future and anger that is developing that I can't do the things that used to be simple for me. And because of that, I am tending to kind of hide and interact less with people.
Mm.
I don't know, how have you managed changing abilities and
It's such a great, again, I have deep empathy for that that person who's feeling that, and anyone who feels that. I it sometimes sounds easy when I say I have to work on acceptance and accept the things that I can't do. I can't do anymore. It's easy. It sounds easy, but I know it's a lot of work. And in the story, if you hadn't read the story that came out about my full story on the website and through social media, I said in there, I don't think one should ever expect themselves to master acceptance. I think it's something, and I will just, again, coming from my perspective, it's something that I believe I will need to understand, cope with, accept, be in that accept space for a while, but then something knocks you off that and you got to find your way back on. Now, how you get back on, that's something Ashley's talked to a couple of times, which I haven't mentioned, is one of the things that's worked really well for me is I have a great therapist who I've worked with for many years. And even using the terminology that was in the question about anger, one of the first times he saw me after I was diagnosed, he said to me, he said, it's okay. It's okay for you to be pissed off. That's what he said. It's not fair what's happening to you. It's not fair what your family now has to witness and take on. And it's okay. And sometimes in future meetings, I would start, he'd be like, how are things? And I said, today or this week has been one of those where I've been pissed off that I have this. And so I would say, be realistic. And this is another one where, like, be kind to yourself. I
Mm.
don't think that you'll ever get to a place where you're not somewhere deep inside angry, because it is taking things away. Even if I say they're back there and we can't control those things, let's focus on the things we can control. I say that to you humbly, knowing that that is a constant exercise of practicing acceptance, and whether it's through a therapist or a friend that that just is great to listen to, or you have an Ashley in your life who also happens to be a social worker and handles these types of situations, lean on them when you feel it's necessary, but don't ever put the pressure on yourself that you're going to master acceptance. I think as long as you are cognitively there to think about it and these things are happening, uh, they are difficult, and that's why I mention it as one of the hardest things for me now is knowing things are happening with more frequency and potentially more further withdrawing from some of the things I can do, which limit me, the things around cooking and that in the house. And people ask me about the car. I think what's helped me selfishly is that I had two jarring things happen right away when I got the diagnosis. Well, three. I got the diagnosis, and on that same day, I knew I wasn't going to be able to work anymore. I was going to have to step aside. And I was told, you no longer can drive for the rest of your life. So, like, three jarring things hit me. So I know that sometimes when I say, like, I have found this place where I can look forward, it's because three jarring things happened to me right away. And I really had to go deep down into the dark to find that light. And now I can talk more about it. But again, I come back to be so kind to yourself. And not taking the words from my therapist, it's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to have those days and weeks.
Thank you. I think a very fitting way to conclude is with that message to be kind to yourself, whether you are living with dementia or supporting someone in your life. And we've seen in the chat people feeling guilt or regret over mistakes that they've made. And where there is no easy way to navigate dementia, and we're all doing the best that we can. And by being here today and learning and communicating and sharing, that's a great step forward. So just thank you to Ashley and Mark, and thank you to everyone for your questions. And I see there's some suggestions for future webinars, and so thank you. We appreciate that. I am going to turn it back to River for our closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you to everyone for their great and thoughtful questions, and Mark and Ashley for your amazing answers. Thank you so much to Mark and Ashley as well for being here and sharing your time and experiences with us. It's been a tremendous honor, and I think we can all say we're very moved and have learned so much from you both. To everyone who's attended today, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. and care for one another in the chat. I was really moved just reading your suggestions to one another and holding space for one another. That's so important. If you are interested in learning more about the Alzheimer Society of British Columbia or have questions about dementia, you can visit our website, which will pop in the chat here soon, or you can call our First Link Dementia Helpline at 1-800-936-6033. It's been shared a couple times in here, and oh, look, it's up on the screen. But again, and there's also we have a few different helplines for the Chinese community, the South Asian community, and in different languages, and also the Yukon. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. It's been wonderful to share this space with you. And now I'm going to pass it over to Cassandra.
Thank you, River. Um, And as we come to the end of our webinar, just a huge thank you to our moderator, River, and our panelists, Ashley and Mark, and to everyone who made this conversation possible. We're so grateful to all of you for being here today. As River mentioned, if you have questions or concerns about dementia, please don't hesitate to call our First Link Dementia Helpline. Services available in English Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and in Cantonese, Mandarin, Punjabi, Hindi, and Urdu Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and in the Yukon Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And just a note that a link to the recording of today's session will be available on our on-demand webpage at allsbc.org/on-demand within a week, along with an extensive list of other recordings. And just finally, if you are interested in learning more about our Lived Experience Partner Program, please email livedexperience@alzheimerbc.org or visit allsbc.org/livedexperience. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.